This is Caffeinated Risk, the monthly podcast for security professionals by security professionals, focused on the principles of enterprise security risk management, exploring technology and business management issues and how they relate to information security risk. Once a month, two self-proclaimed grumpy security guys bring you analysis, insights, and interviews with leading security risk professionals to learn how they work through a project, a program, or their careers using a risk-based approach to security. Now here are your hosts, Tim McCreet and Doug Leese.
Welcome, folks, to the next podcast from Caffeinated Risk. In this session, we chat with Dave Tyson, President and Chief Security Officer of Apollo Information Systems Corporation. Dave's achieved a hell of a lot in his career. Before joining Apollo, Dave held CISO roles with SC Johnson and Pacific Gas and Electric. He was the Director of Global Security Operations for eBay, as well as the Chief Security Officer for the City of Vancouver. That's where Doug and I met Dave way back in the day. He's also a past president of ASAS International in 2015 and spearheaded the Enterprise Security Risk Management Commission at ASAS, which has now become part of the DNA of ASAS International. I'm fortunate to lead the ESRM program at ASAS as a member of the Global Board of Directors. He even found time to write a book. It's entitled Security Convergence, Managing Security Risk, and it was published back in 2007. I've known Dave for a lot of years, and I've always been impressed with his real-world security knowledge. And now, let's check out our latest podcast with Dave Tyson.
I actually did read most of your book in the last day and a bit.
Holy.
I found it really refreshing. I thought it was quite well done.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, it was written I started writing in 2005, and so it's a little behind the times now, but I still think that there's still got useful things to say.
Well, the saddest part is there's a lot of stuff there that is still absolutely true today.
And in some cases, still ahead of its time, I'm afraid.
Yes.
Well, I was going to ask, so what do you think has changed? So you wrote it in, 2005, or you started up in 2005. Where's the change from when you started it to where you are today? Like, what do you see the change?
Well, I mean, if you look at the sheer resistance the industry had, I mean, I got people calling for my head when I wrote that. Physical and cyber groups can work together. That's crazy talk.
Anarchy, right? Just anarchy.
What they didn't understand, they didn't get the core message with, hey, it's about the business and it's about risk. And that's a language we both have to speak. And so when you look at how it's evolved, and now that IT has sort of become, in many companies, the business,
right?
It's become so much more critical, and it's not about who reports to who. At the end of the day, it's if you've got to manage risk, you get to choose how you do that. And unfortunately, the three core fundamental components of convergence have never changed, and I've never met anybody to make a decent argument against them.
Yeah.
Right. Other than they don't like it. Right. They don't like the ideas. It's just it's too hard to do. Well, okay, but it doesn't make it a bad idea.
No, I get it, but I mean, so how do you go from convergence to a risk-based or an ESRM-based approach? Like I think for me, that's part of the struggle is you get past where you started with your book, and then we move into, because I mean, you chaired the first run that we have at ESRM through ASAS. You went through all that stuff. You still teach, present that, you still provide that. So it's like it's like folks are still missing this fundamental gap that it's about risk and it's about the value to the business. So I mean, how the hell do you get that across or back to the business?
Well, I mean, I think one, we need the business to drive some of this. Like, I mean, one of the things I'm famous for saying is the day the CFOs figure out that they're paying for 2 security operations centers and 2 identity and access control systems, and they're going to be, 1, pissed, and 2, they're going to say, is there a way to do, to bring these things together? And the answer has been yes for 10 years. And so that's the first bit. The second piece is the threats converged back in the day, right? I mean, we saw people started by dropping USB sticks in the parking lot or doing URL attacks with putting flyers on people's cars.
Yeah.
And then they started moving towards attacking physical systems like generators and all that in the Aurora attack. And then they're going after layoffs and trying to socially engineer people into clicking on links. And it just goes from there, right? And it continues to the point where, it's completely converged. So anybody who's running a siloed program, is behind the day they start, and they're not going to catch up super fast. And now when you talk about ESRM, we said, okay, there's got to be more boardroom interaction. There's got to be a philosophical alignment with leadership that we need to manage this, like kind of in the vein of ERM, right? In that enterprise risk view.
Yep.
I think the challenge is convergence / ERM has almost moved, and I dare to say this, as a tactical optimization strategy, not a strategy in general. It's not a case so much about, you can have a great strategy, but most people don't implement it very well. When you rise up to the strategic level, listening to every CIO or CEO survey ever done, and they say, how many of you came up with really great strategies? And then how many of those strategies actually got implemented?
Yeah, fair.
It's a really low number. And now that we're at the strategic level, primarily with a seat at the table, we're in the same boat, right? So this goes back to some of the info I sent you a few weeks ago, which is it doesn't matter how much money you spend on security.
Yeah.
If you do it poorly, it's still poor. Look, you get a choice. When the CISO or somebody else presents you with this risk, and assuming it's real, then your choices are to do something about it or not. And if you don't, then that's doing something.
Right. Yeah. You made a decision, right? You've made that conscious decision because you decided not to do something, right?
And you've now accepted that risk. So the whole idea about either accepting more risk or mitigating that risk or making another risk mitigation decision is happening inherently. The problem is the velocity at which that threat profile changes now is so rapid, the old model doesn't serve.
Yeah.
Right? And that's it doesn't matter whether you do it converged or not, right? The problem is if you're not looking at the entire enterprise and all of the threats and prioritizing that way, doesn't matter what you do, it's going to be suboptimally prioritized. So you're spending money poorly, and you're making bad risk decisions, at least suboptimal risk decisions. And leadership is, likely hearing from you a lot more than they really need to.
And that's my fear, right? And that's after watching this for a while and seeing where we're not spending the money where we need to. And if we are spending it, it feels like we're just throwing money up against the wall and hoping for the best. What's scaring me though is we're still not, we haven't made the case yet for executives to look at us as that subject matter expert or that trusted advisor where, you know what I mean? Like we gain that social license because of what we've been talking about or the risks that we're presenting. Because we're not, to your point, Dave, we're not doing this enterprise approach. It's almost like we're piecemealing this stuff when we're presenting it to executives or to the board.
Yeah, and that is, a common theme that we've all agreed on for some period of time. But here's the problem.
Yeah.
You really want to get in the boardroom, or even if without the boardroom, because I think that's an overused concept, because the board makes strategic decisions, but if you want to get in the executive room, then you've got to make a difference for the business.
Mm-hmm.
And what I see is, and that's why I call it ruthless focus on the business, because what I see is sort of tactically, we don't want the business to suffer from a cyber attack.
Right.
That in itself doesn't sell more widgets.
Yeah.
And so here's the thing. If you look at the people that really make a difference every day, they're in the business unit making a difference. So let me give you an example. There's a certain power company that I spent some time with. And, when we started talking to the head of customer care, she told us, we have 12 million truck rolls a year to someone's house. And it takes the average stop is 12 minutes. And I said, well, why is that? And then she goes, well, there's all this security crap for them to dial up to and connect back. So when we went out and solved that problem and cut that truck stop from 12 minutes down to about 7, all of a sudden the business is more efficient.
Mhm.
And now they can do more for the customer. So the next time I want an audience with leadership, it's not a problem because I'm making the business more effective through good security.
Yeah.
You know,
And if I look at that, we've touched on this a couple times before, but this was in your book as well, is putting the user in the middle of that truck driver whose real job is to get the electricity back on or measure the meter or whatever he's doing. It is not to satisfy your paper tiger.
absolutely.
There seems to be a lot of paper tiger satisfaction going on in the I don't know how else to explain it, but when I look at some of these things that go through, it doesn't make sense to me. A lot of these controls are just too complicated, and they don't actually change anything. They don't solve the risk. They just meet a quote unquote standard that somebody read somewhere versus looking at what is that guy in the truck actually trying to do? What data is he handling? How sensitive is it? All of the pieces. So how did you go from 12 minutes to 7? Maybe we could tear into that and see what did I take away to fix it?
Well, first off, you go to IT and you realize that they're running around with laptops because they want something that's rugged. They're running around with laptops that run slow and they're old and they haven't been replaced because IT's spending their money in IT, not on the trucks in the field.
Right.
There's nobody in the business that understands, by the way, we can speed things up if we get better equipment. So if IT's not doing it, then it's not getting done.
Right.
You get out there and you look at the problem. And again, I'm not looking at the problem as a security guy. I'm looking at the problem as what's the business need here? Well, they need to go faster. And here's the waste.
Yep.
Right? It's like taking a Kaizen exercise or a Six Sigma approach. You go, how do I solve this problem? Well, we got waste. Let's get rid of the waste. Well, we need to dial up faster. We need faster processing, and we don't want to sacrifice security. So we need better security algorithms on the encryption side. All that tech exists.
Right.
Next thing you know, they got a tough book in the truck, 8x RAM, and then an RSA, an RSA security software to handle all the rest of it. And bang, it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And a little tiny bit of training, right?
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, let's sustain this with a little ongoing training program.
Right.
Because when you go around to companies and you see the realities of what we deal with as security practitioners, people are afraid to tackle the tough stuff. Like, what percentage of functionality is actually turned on in security tools that are deployed on a network?
20% if you're lucky.
Yeah, smaller. Yeah.
Why is that? Oh, because the business doesn't like all that restriction.
Right.
Well, does the business know what they just gave up? Right. So that's the first thing. Second off, the IT realities that even if you try to install it, most stuff doesn't install 100%. So now you get devices that become platforms for hackers to leverage and launch from. What's your mitigation control against that? So you've got IT drift. The posture of the entire IT is drifting every day when somebody's opening a port or running a service, or God forbid, the physical security guys are running the camera server, and oh, by the way, it's got a web server on it that's open to the internet.
Yep.
Or somebody just installed a camera somewhere that happens to have its own firewall that's bridging the network.
Yeah, that never happens, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, and we see it all the time. So you got to think this stuff through. And if you're not looking at all the potential problems, you're dead in the water.
But that's what I like about that example. You go from 12 minutes down to 7. It doesn't seem like a lot, but a couple million truck rolls a year, that's a lot of time, right? Yeah. Like, and it's a pure business response to the problem. It wasn't I can make security better for you. You looked at it from a business angle first. And that's kind of that's what I love about that approach, is that it reflects this whole I'm a partner for the business, and we're going to keep at least some table stakes in place from a security perspective. But after that, let's make sure we solve the business problem and give you some of that time. So I can't imagine what they would do with 5 minutes times 12 million truck rolls.
Right.
That's something a hell of a lot better than what they were doing before, right?
Right, absolutely. But in that case, we could see the problem.
Yeah.
And so it's finding the solution. But in other examples, we didn't know what the problem was. We didn't know there was a problem. Like I'm sitting on a tuk-tuk somewhere in Asia, and the business in the local market is struggling to get updated, accurate accounts of sales because the tuk-tuks only go out with one of each product, for the product company. Well, that's because you didn't think you got a tuk-tuk, slap an antenna on that baby, and let's find a way to get it to communicate. So every single time, just like the donut chain punches something into the cash register, and somewhere down the line, somebody's loading another donut on a truck.
Yep.
You just have to go and figure out what the problem is, but you don't get that until you get into the field. And if you're looking at it from just a cyber perspective, you're missing half the goal. That's the reality.
Now, I had one more thought, and I just wanted to throw this out here and see what you think. It's the next iteration, right? The next phase of what this profession is going to look like. If you were going to tell somebody who's just coming into the business or wants to take a look at this as a profession, what's the skills you would ask them to have? Or what would you ask them to go get from a skill sets perspective? Technical stuff beside, right? Because we know we're going to have some tech skills to get into the game. But what's your recommendation to the new generation or the next gen coming up and wanting to get into the profession?
Well, I mean, and that's a great question because the roles are, they're starting to fragment, and there's so many different aspects. It really depends on the level of forward thinking of your employer, right? Because if you're working with a dinosaur, then you need pretty traditional skills. You're going to be doing incident response, and you're going to be doing compliance, and you're going to be doing stuff like that. And you need to be good at those things. But if you're working in a high tech environment, maybe you need SecDevOps or whatever else. You need to be on that end, AppSec or whatever else. And then there's so much. But at the end of the day, as you grow your career, and this is what I've been telling people for years, is you've got to have the ability to have those soft skills so you can get in the conversation, be taken seriously. Because we've all had our presentations to the board or to leadership filtered by some executive because they don't want the message to go up there. And so if they don't hear it and something bad happens, I mean, now you look at the world now, executive liability is changing.
Yep.
You go look at the Caremark decision, or you go look at any of the other ones that are out there right now. And this applies both sides of the border because we share the same precedent cases, right? And the rules have changed, and executives are expected now to monitor risks to the company. That includes cybersecurity risks. And if they don't have the right stuff, or the person's not speaking to them in a language they can understand, in my view, we've got to stop talking about, the multi-factor authentication project status with the board.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
They don't need to know about it, even if they ask, because it doesn't matter to them. They're just asking because they understand, they've heard the words.
Yep.
What we need to talk about is how can we ensure that the crown jewels aren't going to get stolen, and that you get the return on investment from that R&D funnel that you're expecting to get $1 billion back on.
Yeah. Well, you'd mentioned the annual reviews and the risk register and stuff like that, and how the velocity of what's going on just doesn't support that. And then as you're talking now about informed decisions on those guys, to me, it all sounds like a change in how we are stewarding these risks, and stewarding actually meaning what's important and you're driving towards that. But we still seem to be fascinated, maybe lower down, with, I would say, simple metrics, like we're 87% along on Project X.
Yeah.
And how do we get them focusing on the big picture and stop looking at this little minutia?
Yeah.
Because when you try and say, I don't want to talk about that, you should know about this, they say, no, just give me the numbers in 3 bullets. I got to roll this up into a pie chart or something.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say something that's going to make Tim smile, but while I get that compliance is important and measuring frameworks and maturity and all those things that's all really great. every company in the world that's been hacked was compliant with all that shit.
Sure. Yeah, no, he's right. He's bang on, right?
So that's the first thing. And the second piece is that people don't understand the relationship in security between the aspects of it and the outcomes. So what I mean by that is security is what we refer to as a weakest link discipline, right? And what that means in the world of education is that you can fix one thing on the pie chart and turn the color green from red. That doesn't mean you're any more secure than you were before. Because just like back in the day when the receptionist used to leave her password, taped to the monitor and the courier ran off with it, the same thing is true on the data network. So you can go and the audit team can tell you to patch and close every hole on every server and every computer in the company. But if you don't own the identity, and the bad guy can just roll them all back. And I've seen it happen during incident response engagements, literally.
That's scary.
So if you don't control the assets, if you don't control the identities, you don't know what the activity is, and the basic, four legs of the stool here, all of that work is just activity. It's just busy work.
Yeah.
It doesn't in any way have anything to do with security, right? It's just activity. That's all it is. And that's the fundamental thing that people have to know. If you don't understand how the hacker works, you don't understand the threat actors and their tools and tradecraft. And the number one thing that I think every company's got to, that hasn't done the work is that if your tools are not sophisticated enough to detect the really low and slow stuff, then it doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. You've got to detect it if you want to respond to it, and God forbid, stop it from pillaging the organization. And I go into companies all the time, some great folks with great intentions, and I say to them, well, so, you think you're in pretty good shape? Cool. What are you using for advanced malware detection? How have you trained your finance team not to respond to business email compromise emails?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you haven't done the basics, and I call that the basics now, It doesn't matter what decision you're making, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yep.
Not only, let's go past suboptimal, it's wrong. Whatever money you're spending is going to be partially wasted.
No, and I agree. And that's where, so I get into this discussion all the time. Same thing, security is not compliance. Do you know what I mean? Like security is not the checklist to get the compliance status. Compliance is different. That's a legislated or regulatory requirement. Compliance is different than security, right?
I'm not saying don't do it.
No, I get it. Yeah.
No, I'm saying I get you got to do it because, 1,000 security people sat in a room some year and came up with it. But it's just that in itself doesn't make you secure. And that's the point that I'm trying to get across is you actually have to do the security stuff. And, and that's really important for people. And it's tough because when the audit, the auditor comes down and says, you got these 107 things to do, go patch this and do that. That costs money.
Yep.
That's people not making the business go forward, right? Because they're busy patching servers. They're not deploying new applications. So go back and ask that auditor, if we do these, which ones of them will actually reduce risk and by how much? The answer is, I don't know, right? And it's like, well, don't you think you should?
Yeah.
Well, that's not what we do. Well, great. So what you're saying is spend money on the business behalf and maybe get no value from it whatsoever.
Yeah. And you mentioned the weakest link concept, how it's so true, especially with vuln management, because they are measuring this many things that go on, but there may be a risk acceptance, quote unquote, sitting in a register somewhere that says it's okay to leave this default password on the box because it doesn't come from the vendor any other way. Why worry about patching anything then?
Well, yeah, because acceptance it's still a risk. Like, sorry, I'm just going to rant a bit. Just because you accepted the risk, it doesn't take away the problem. So, and I've seen this in so many other places where it's, we have a process and I can't get to that patch right now. So I'm going to let that Windows NT box sit there and manage this really critical piece of infrastructure because I got nothing else to do with it. What? What? But I got an exception. I got a letter here. Yeah, it was dated a year ago. Yep, and it's still valid, isn't it? Because it's not the 31st of May yet. Son of a, you got to be kidding me. Like, you're an example of an infrastructure piece that you're okay with being on an NT box, and you're good with that. Is your executive good with that? Do they understand what's going to happen when this thing goes sideways? Like, you want to shoot yourself after a while, really.
Well, there's a really great example of there's a very smart consultant who helped when we were building the security center for the Olympics at the City of Vancouver. They were building that one. And, it was a great consultant named Ray Bernard on the physical side. He was helping us with a bunch of the redesign. And he was telling a story about, how his client said, yeah, I really love that security work. That'll be really great, except that I have no budget, so I can't pay for it. And so he said, well, good, let's go see your boss. And we went and saw his boss, and he said, here's the risk acceptance form. I need you to sign this because you're now accepting this risk because you don't have budget to fix these things. And the guy was like, what? Mm-hmm. No, I'm not accepting that risk. That means that we could go, bad things could happen. And so he gave him the money. And so it really brings around this interesting concept called who has the authority to accept risk? Because if you think about it from a financial or a legal perspective, we already have so many rules inside of companies by your level or whatever you do is, what you're allowed to do. You can spend this much money. You can sign this amount of a contract. You can authorize this kind of a activity. But in IT, the lowliest server admin can put the company completely at risk and shut it down.
Yep. That's scary, right? Truly scary.
Back to Doug's comment about stewardship. Nobody, at the board level would ever say yes to that. And go back to the Experian or Equifax Act, right? I mean, leadership said, yeah, go fix that stuff. That's bad news. And in the end, nobody bothered to check to see that the guy who was assigned it actually did it. And 130 million people got screwed over.
Yeah.
And so where's the governance? Where's the stewardship, of that data? But again, this brings us back to the fact of who owns the data. Too many times companies want to let the IT guys own it. And that's a really bad idea because IT guys don't know which thing is the most important thing. No. Right? And who should have access to what. But the business has gotten used. They got fat, dumb, and happy off of IT doing everything for a lot of years. And now nobody wants to, I don't have time to decide who can have access to data. Well, who does that?
Well, exactly. And I mean, I've always used this analogy. I'm proud I created it myself, is that IT runs the parking lot. Right? So they're going to give you lights and they're going to give you lines in the stalls. Sometimes they're going to charge you for pulling your car in. They're going to have sometimes a guard walking around making sure that no one's breaking into your car. But it's your car, friend. So when you drive it in, and if you want to drive your car and pop the hood and roll down the windows and leave everything visible for someone to look at, it's still your car. We provide the infrastructure. I give you a place to park it. But brother, it is still your car.
But the other piece is, there's been so much I would call, I don't know if management negligence is the right word, but certainly in the way in which IT has been operated and allowed to degrade, right? This technical debt. Mm-hmm. In many places I've seen CIOs who are going like, I don't have 20 million to lift and shift this mess out of here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, the fix seems insurmountable. And, the answer is, okay, well, don't try to solve everything tomorrow.
Right.
Let's go back to Porter and find the things that create the most value and go fix those and protect those first. Because everything else can burn at the end of the day. You're still making money.
That was awesome, Dave. Thank you for this. This was great.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just put the pin back in the hand grenade now. And,
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for that, right? So, thanks for listening to the latest podcast from Caffeinated Risk. Make sure you visit our website, caffeinatedrisk.com, to stay up to date on what we've been working on. Our website has bios of our podcast guests, posts about topics we're passionate about, and even a library of reference material we find valuable in the work we do every day. Thanks so much for listening to Caffeinated Risk.